this is a limited cinema release?
Yes, I mean, it's in cinemas, and I think it is worth seeing in a cinema because of the form of it. But should we talk about? Shall I leap in?
Yes, but I should say, Bianca said to me, "How did you see this film? Did you see it in the cinema or on your laptop?" And I said, "I did see it on my laptop." She said, "Okay, the cinema is the best place to see it."
Yeah,
I couldn't quite bring myself to. I'd seen some of it on my phone as well, but the thing is, it's 4.5 hours, so I was determined to get to the end. And in the second part of the interview, we do talk about the end of the film, which is very definitely a full stop, and it's an optimistic note at the end of a pretty grim story.
And also, there's an intermission with with a musical interlude. So it's actually, well, let's start with this, because in a way you've kind of cut to the nub of it. The first time I ever interviewed Steve McQueen, he'd just made Hunger and he'd won the Camera d'Or. But I was interviewing him also about Queen and Country, the installation that he had done, because he was the Imperial War Museum had commissioned him to do a piece about British troops in Iraq, and he had done that piece, which it's like a big oak box, almost shaped like a coffin, which has these glass slides that you pull out, and they have stamps of the fallen. And he had tried to get the post office at that point to actually issue the stamps, and they didn't. And when they didn't, it became a kind of interesting talking point about the relationship between art and politics and war and fiction and all that sort of stuff. So he comes out of a visual art background. He won the Turner Prize. He beat Tracy Emin to the Turner Prize, actually, at the time of when she was doing the Unmade Bed and all that stuff. And he had made this thing, Deadpan, which is, that the famous Buster Keaton stunt of the house,
Yes.
front of the house falling down. And Deadpan is Steve McQueen reproducing that stunt of him standing and the house, the front falling down, and seen from different angles and repeated as a kind of strange ritual. And it's really quite a breathtaking piece. So he comes from visual art and his visual art and film installations, and then he moves from that into features. He carried on making visual installations. He made a very strange little short film with Charlotte Rampling, with him prodding his finger into her eye, that she described as a film about resistance to violence. It's a fascinating piece. So he's always had that background. And I would say that he has always straddled both those divides. And I think in this particular case, this film does exist somewhere between film and visual art. In fact, the longer version that they've spoken about and the possibility of that being an installation. I think this is as close as cinema gets to a visual art installation, when he was talking about it being a meditation.
Yes, I think it's a very good description.
Yeah, exactly. So it's not like a linear narrative. It is a meditation that circles round and round and round in a way that's quite hypnotic. In fact, with the intermission, one of the strange things is, because the voiceover is by Melanie Hyams, and she has this very sort of, it's not uninflected, but it's very deliberately kind of almost.
In fact, in the second part of the interview, they talk about how they asked her to deliver their lines, which is emotionless.
Yes, right, exactly so. And so the first half finishes, and then there's this intermission, and the second half picks up, and it's almost the same tone of voice. It's like we're getting back into this, and so it's a cumulative effect. And when they said that they did all the houses, you can imagine it's something you would go into, an exhibition space and sit and watch some, and then come out and then go back in again, because it's kind of. So that's the first thing to say. It is something that I think blurs the boundary between cinema and visual art installation. That is something to which I confess that in the past I have been quite resistant, but not in this case. Talked about living with ghosts, that the juxtaposition of daughter's school now and the Gestapo interrogation centre before. The text is the past, the images are the present. I thought that was really fascinating, because I do think that tension between those two things is because you asked Steve McQueen, was the book the beginning? And he said, well, not really. The beginning was this project about superimposition of past and present. And then he heard Bianca typing, and then he thought, okay, actually, that's the text. And I think, so the way those things fit together, the juxtaposition does some really interesting stuff. On the one hand, it gives you the fact that the history is there in these, in some cases, ordinary street scenes of people getting on with life, But in the very recent past, these atrocities and the reading of the atrocities is just so methodical and so that it's kind of cumulative. But there is also the strange thing about what do you make, not you, what does one make of the juxtaposition between those things? And you raised very astutely the issue about some of the footage is shot during lockdown and lockdown protests. And I thought it was very interesting when she said, we're not making any connection between those things. In fact, what we're saying is there is no connection between those two things. But it is true that what the film invites you to do is to make your own decision about what the juxtaposition of those two things says. Now, because of what I know I think, and because of what I know you think, and what I assumed, and I was glad to hear confirmed they think as well, there is no comparison. No. There is no comparison at all. But what's fascinating is that it's a work of art that provokes some people to believe that, because I believe that some people have.
Some people have said, you know, that some of those sequences feel a bit like GB News or Fox News or something, that they're suggesting that there's an equivalence between the Nazi restrictions and then the Dutch government's restrictions, which is clearly totally preposterous and does not bear even the merest hint of any kind of examination.
But this does, again, take us back to the installation thing that he said, that it began with the thing about the juxtaposition of past and present. And what, in any artwork, what that juxtaposition is going to do is to make you go, okay, what, if anything, is the connection or the disconnect? And I think that's really fascinating because, you know, we've always talked about films give you what you bring to them. You have to bring a certain mindset to that in order to interpret it in that way. And I think that's why almost, again, I say it's kind of almost closer to a visual art installation than it is to a film, because it is absolutely something that requires the involvement of the audience to complete it. And I think that's really important. On the subject of the score, the Oliver Coates score is terrific. I'm playing some tracks on the my Scala Radio show tomorrow. I think that score is really, really well judged. It'd be very easy to get that wrong, but I think that Oliver Coates has done a brilliant job with it, and I think the music is absolutely extraordinary. And I think that, because I don't know whether you talk about this in the second half of the interview, which I haven't heard yet, but he's now working on a project called Blitz.
Yes, I think he's pretty much finished by this.
Right. Okay. Fine. Which is
a movie about the Blitz in London, and it just sounds incredible. It stars Saoirse Ronan and Stephen Graham.
Yeah.
And you think, okay, wow, a Steve McQueen movie about the Blitz? Yes, please, thank you. And he says in that first part, you know, I'm a Londoner, so this is
yeah.
He said, and I think he says, you know, we don't really know much about it anymore, so he wants to put that right.
So I think it's fascinating that what he has continued to do, despite becoming, you know, this really groundbreaking, important, you know, feature filmmaker, first black filmmaker to win an Oscar for Best Film, groundbreaking work, extraordinary success, but has continued to work in television. The Small Axe series was television funded. Has continued to work in visual arts. Has continued not just to, to tell interesting stories. I mean, I think that the Widows, that was derived from a TV series, I thought he did absolutely brilliantly with, continues to push the boundaries of what the form can do. And you and I were talking about this in the car and the way in. It's a big ask for 4 hours 20 minutes, but the fact is it has stayed with us, hasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
The experience of watching Occupied City has stayed with us, and I've thought about Zone of Interest a lot. Zone of Interest is almost like the complete structural antithesis, small, compact, completely contained, and this is huge, and it almost feels like, as he said, like an excerpt from a larger project. But I think actually both of them are really, they both present a really interesting way of revisiting these events. And this comes back to what I said before about sometimes you have to look to the side of something to see it. And I think they're both doing that in different ways. I was a big fan, but I think you were too.
Yes. I think I would like to have heard the interview before I watched the film, because as soon as you get someone saying this is a meditation, okay, so when are you going to go and see this film? If you're going to go and see this in a cinema, go and see it at 3:00 in the afternoon.
Yes.
Allow the rest of the day.
Uh-huh.
Because we come to this in the second half of the interval is not there for you to go and buy more popcorn. The interval is serving a completely different purpose.
Yes.
Anyway, so We'll talk more with Steve McQueen and Bianca Stigter in take 2. But when you do see it, if you do see it, we would love to hear what you make of it, because it is quite an astonishing piece.